Imagine relying on a dozen different software programs to run your business, none of which are connected, and each one more expensive and more complicated than the last. It can be pretty stressful. Now imagine Odoo. Odoo has all the programs you'll ever need, and they're all connected on one platform. Doesn't Odoo sound amazing? Let Odoo harmonize your business with simple, efficient software that can handle everything for a fraction of the price. Sign up today at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
America, America, you used to be so fun, but now you go to bed at night, scrolling on your phone. Well, listen up, America, Carnival is here. There's comedy and snorkeling and dining, like everything from sea to shining sea.
Find your fun again today. Carnival is calling.
Save up to 40% off your cruise vacation. Offer plastic cruise fare only. Restrictions apply. Visit carnival.com for details. Ships registry, the Bahamas and Panama.
Welcome to Season 4 of the Knack for Business podcast.
We have a question for you. Are you struggling to stand out and earn trust while buyers endlessly compare options in today's messy middle? That's exactly what Martin will tackle. In this episode, he'll break down how buyers really make decisions, why trust and timing beat flashy features, and how small businesses can show up smarter without over-responding. If you're ready to cut through the noise and win your ideal customers, tune into this show and listen and learn from Martin's practical steps to master the buyer's messy middle. Our guest today is Martin Pietrzak, founder of Pinch Marketing. Now, let me tell you about Martin. He's the founder of Pinch Marketing, obviously, a boutique agency helping technology vendors and partners design campaigns that align with how buyers actually buy. With 20 plus years in tech, SaaS, and channel marketing, Martin has led initiatives for AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, SoftChoice, Zscaler, and Veeam, consistently helping businesses cut through the sea of sameness and earn trust in competitive markets. Martin, absolute pleasure having you here today. Welcome. And do you have a favorite quote or saying, sir?
I do, but before I do, thank you very much for having me on. Super happy to be here, Bernie and Wayne. Thank you for having me, and hello to the audience. So hopefully we will discuss some interesting things that will be beneficial for all of you. But my favorite quote, I always like to think of better people who are better and smarter than me, better than Albert Einstein, saying, in the middle of every difficulty lies an opportunity. So I think I want to start with that.
I like that quote. I've heard it mentioned in several different ways before in the past. So the biggest mind shift for SMB, small, medium businesses, need to make, you don't need a funnel anymore. So what is a funnel and what is it different that you don't need a funnel anymore?
Yeah, so funnel is what we describe in marketing or sales as essentially this linear path, or this funnel that goes from top to bottom, meaning, buyers typically, or at least that's how we thought about it, is people start with the awareness phase, going down to consideration, selection, and ultimately to buy. And we always thought about this as a sort of a linear process, right? Like they learn about us, they get to know us, they get to trust us, they get to know our products, and then ultimately they say, okay, I'm ready to buy. And I think that's the biggest crux of the issue, that's no longer really the case. So we have to stop thinking about marketing and sales funnels, but really start thinking about what we call orbits. So because buyers bounce back and forth between exploration, evaluation, the biggest shift is realizing you don't control that sequence. You're really not in control of what that buyer does and when they do it. So your job is really to stay memorable, trustworthy, and useful whenever they dip back in. So that's pretty much what that is.
I love the title. Tell me about a messy middle. I want to hear more about this.
Yeah, so messy middle. I can't take credit for this term. So this is something that was coined by the Google research team, actually. They, as you can imagine, they have thousands or millions of data points or trillion of data points, and they really better understand how people shop these days. And what they found is that the messy middle is basically this in-between stage between when the buyer becomes first aware of a solution or product and then, to the end of when they're ready to sign the dotted line and buy a product, right? So the messy middle is everything in between. So if you think about this awareness, interest, decision, purchase, which was the before stages, now people are saying people are in this messy middle because they loop. endlessly between all these different tools. So it's not a linear path. It's just like they go back and forth. They jump. They instantly, endlessly loop back and forth. So they go Googling. They go asking peers. They're second guessing themselves. They come back again. I have this analogy I want to use. You watch Netflix probably, right? I think we all do. So I use this analogy. It's like when you go first to Netflix, you see all these thousands of titles, and you're like, okay, where do I start? Right? So maybe the algorithm has giving you a recommendation based on what you watched in the past. Maybe you watch a trailer that's on Netflix. Then you go and read the review on Rotten Tomatoes. Maybe you remember a friend telling you about a show that they really loved. And then you go in and you're like, okay, maybe I'm going to watch another trailer, and then you forget about it. You come back 2 hours later. So the process of you actually choosing when you're going to start playing is quite more complex than it ever was. So that's probably in a nutshell how I want to think about the messy middle.
Wow. So you deal with tech, does this apply to all businesses? And, what's the first time you saw a client going, wow, ta-da, eureka?
Well, yes, I do think it applies to most buying decisions. I think some obviously decisions are easier than others, like you maybe buying a gum at a store or a drink. But a lot of these decisions are probably happening in our unconscious. We don't know why we're making those decisions. However, when did I make this connection first? I think I was working at this big tech reseller, and I was part of this task force to trying to figure out client retention. So it's not necessarily about selling to a product, but it's trying to retain a client. And the initiative started off by me being asked to say, hey, how can we save those clients that just left us? They stopped buying from us. And what I quickly realized is that it doesn't matter what kind of offer we put in front of them, they will not come back. It's too late. And the idea was that the beginning, you can't save a relationship. You have to start with the first hello that you have with a potential prospect or a customer. So it's all these touch points that we're going to have throughout the whole lifetime with the customer that is critical before the sale, during the sale, and after the sale. And so we realized that it's kind of like, I use an analogy when you're in a troubled relationship, you've been there for 20 years, and then your wife tells you or your partner tells you, hey, I'm leaving. Taking them on a Hawaii vacation is not going to solve the problem, right? Like that problem should have been fixed, probably 20 years ago, in this little micro steps. So this is kind of how I'm thinking about this, is that what we realized that you cannot save a customer when they already decided to leave. You have to start with the onboarding process. So we've built something very different. We built this 360-degree marketing campaign and customer success and onboarding program that essentially looked at every single step since before they buy the product, once they buy the product, and until they leave. So we would send personalized messages, welcome messages. We would tell them what the statuses of their licensing are with that particular product. It was a big, very famous SaaS product. I don't name names, but trust me, it's a big one. And once we implemented that, so basically these ongoing touch points with the customer, we realized that the retention rate increased by almost 5%. Now, it doesn't seem like a big number, but to them, it was millions of dollars on an annual basis. So that's kind of really dawned on me that we have to really focus on building and retaining the trust with our customers or prospects. So that's the critical part. So that was I know it's not necessarily that it wasn't the messy middle on the sales cycle side, but it was definitely about that relationship and really being in front of the customer or prospect throughout the whole cycle, right? Not just the beginning, hoping for the best and shutting the door and saying, thank you, here's my check, I'm going to cash it today. So that was sort of the aha moment that I had at that point in time. So I had to start thinking about differently how I'm going to manage those relationships with prospects and customers.
Martin, I almost dread getting into the science, but I can't avoid it. Tell me about behavioral cues so to stay memorable. That's exciting and scary.
Yeah, it is exciting and scary. I always like to think that marketing is a bit about psychology. It's probably quite a bit about psychology and how we think about this. I have a couple examples for you. Everybody probably has a Nike pair of shoes in home. And how people think about buying shoes is not what we necessarily think about it, right? So, runners don't necessarily buy the shoe because they have the most advanced cushioning technology. Now, Nike might actually have that, but that's not why they buy it. Why they buy is because they trust Nike. They trust the brand, the athletes that talk about on their behalf, the community that they build. And so the features are never really the primary selling point. So that's really what the point I'm trying to make is that the psychology of it is that it's not about the product. It's about the relationship and the trust that you build with the community that's going to be really critical. Starbucks is another one, right? Like plenty of coffee shops, cheaper coffee, probably better tasting coffee. But hey, you know what? When I'm on my way to work and I want consistent, trusted brand that's going to always make my latte the way I like it, hey, I'm going to probably knock on Starbucks, door. So that's probably what I say the psychology is super critical. It's about building that relationship so you got the right emotional engagement with the customer, that they trust you, they want to buy from you, because ultimately it's that human connection, the trust. And you know what, 95% of decisions are probably made emotional when we buy. So that's where I'm coming from.
Interesting. Does that even outstrip? Because if you're talking about B2B, you're talking like major SaaS companies, and they're going to go buy a network switch. Other than brand name or reliability, past reliability, they're looking at the specs. So is there kind of a point in time like B2C, like you said, if I'm looking for that coffee and I know that particular vendor has it, and whether they're famous or not, I'll go there, right? But at a certain point in time, does emotions ever kind of take a more of a backseat, or is it always predominant? Even when you know you're the analytical type, it needs to be 2 centimeters wide, no larger, no thinner, right? And you have that kind of like precision. Is it always behavioral then tied into that?
I think that from a buyer's perspective, I think yes, we all have preconceived notions of what that product or solution needs to do for us, right? So like you said, maybe it needs to be 2 centimeters long. It has to fit that hole. Absolutely. So I have specs in the back of my mind that it has to fulfill. But when you go to the store, when you go and start shopping online, you will notice that there's probably hundreds of solutions that are competitive products that are out there that have the same specs. The question is, which ones on the aisle, which one are you going to pick? I think that's what I'm talking about. It's like, how do people think about choosing that best product that fits those specifics, right? Because a lot of products will fit the profile of, oh yeah, it's the right length, it's the right width, that says all the features that I need. But now, how do I choose this plethora of choice? And I think that's where we're coming back to this idea of that we need to really get into the minds of that customer and trying to figure like what's going to make them feel and get to that decision point, right? So from a psychological perspective, like we talk about small businesses a little bit, but even small business have an opportunity to really outsmart or the bigger brands that have bigger pockets. And I think there's certain tricks you can use, like heuristics, like so social proof, where others are telling your story for you. Others like me chose this, or the authority bias, where we could say experts like so and so recommended this product, right? That's why influencer marketing is becoming a big thing, because now you're not necessarily hearing from the brands themselves, but you're hearing from the experts out there telling your story, the ambassadors of those brands. Or things like the power of now. Ready in 30 days, ready in 30 seconds, ready to implement. So those are the nudges that you can use to sort of put that customer into your court without necessarily having like a Super Bowl budget,
I think this is really interesting, but you learned this over a series of time and events. When you were standing at the pool near the deep end, how did this process start? How did you begin?
Well, I can tell you how I did it. I mean, like I've been in the trenches for 20 years. So I've seen it through a lot of failures. Let's just put it that way, and a lot of data points, right? So we always learn not from our successes, but probably more so from our failures. Because we tried a lot of different things, and sometimes those small campaigns that should have worked better than others, and it were flashy, all the features and all the products were amazing, still didn't do very well. So it made me think, like, what's behind the scenes that I'm not picking up on? So I think that the best thing we can really do, and I think that the best thing we can ever do, is really get in front of our customers and better understand what made them go with us. So, when people talk about why did we lose a deal, and they always put this in their CRM platform, oh, I didn't win this deal because, well, we don't do enough of saying, hey, when did we win this deal? And asking customers, hey, why did you buy us? Why was our solution in your mind better than others? Ask those human questions like, was it a review or testimonial that you've read? Maybe it was a colleague that recommended us. Maybe it was something about the offer. Maybe it was this scarcity, exclusivity factor. Maybe because we were showing up consistently in their searches, in their research. We were there from start to finish. So a lot of these things could be the factor, but you need to better talk. You really need to get in the mind of your customer. I call it the empathy, right? So the better you understand what your customers' pains are, what their challenges are, and then figuring out and asking those questions, how are you actually solving for those pain points, those challenges? That's really critical. That's what I find. Painfully aware of those steps that I had to learn, but that's my advice to the owners of businesses is essentially, if you are not in front of the businesses, make sure your sellers are in front of those businesses and those customers asking those questions.
So if you have a product, and I'm gonna take it that if you have a SaaS product, it's the user interface. But if I have a widget, let's say a mouse or a microphone, it's going to be a little bit more. Does it work? But what does it feel like? How does when the haptics of it, the visual appearance? There was in Instagram there was someone talking. Actually, it was LinkedIn. Yeah, the shape of a bottle. If it's tall and lanky, means it has an inference that it's more expensive, and you're going to pay more.
Mm.
How do you shape that? And not that the value is not there, but how do you shape the end result going out the door, whether it's virtual or in hand? How do you shape it so you're kind of optimizing it? Do you do like different iterations? Come back to the sales team and huddle and like, okay, tweak here, tweak there, or do you do like A/B testing or what?
Mm. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of experimentation. Chances are you'll never nail it on the first try. But let's assume that you, as a business owner, you have a vision, you have a North Star, you know who you're going after, you know how you want to be perceived and seen in the world. I could talk about differentiation and the sea of sameness a little bit later on, but this idea of you have to find your place that you own, meaning like what are you really, really good at that nobody else can do better than you? I think that's what first and foremost, that's really the key here. And if you don't know the answer to that question, you really should think hard and bring in the folks and ask the tough questions, bring in the sellers, bring in the customers and say like, okay, why did you select us? Why were we better than the other folks? And let's assume you've defined it and what, if you're a wine seller and people say, hey, you know what, your wine tastes really, really good. And it's up there with the French, with the Californian wines. Why are you selling for such a cheap price? So maybe at that point in time, you could say, hey, I need to rethink how I want to brand myself. And now I'm going to upscale my brand. Maybe I'm going to start with those heavier bottles, right? That have a higher correlation to people's perception that it's actually a better wine. Like you're absolutely right. There were psychological tests that they've done on wine tasting, and all they did, but they put two of the same wines. One was in a cheap bottle, the other one was a nice, heavy, dark, bottle that feels like thuddy, and of course, majority of people, they love the other wine, even though it's the same wine. So I think you have to build those components and decide, of course, and experiment. What works for you? What venues, what kind of customers? I'll give you another example. I read recently, I'm borrowing from this other gentleman that I was following. And he talked about this idea that when you want to buy like a luxury car, luxury brand like Rolls-Royce or Bentley or these Maybach Mercedes that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, you don't go to car shows. Because now you're comparing yourself to the Hondas and the Toyotas and the Hyundais and the Fords. And guess what? Now you're the most expensive guy in the room. So what did they do differently? They decided to exhibit at air shows, basically where people buy airplanes. So now if I'm a buyer of a private jet that costs me $100 million, that Bentley is just a little like bonus, right? It's like a small little chip-cha-ching. It's you're shifting that perception, right? And so they realized we didn't sell any cars and our cars. We sold a lot of cars when we were comparing it to airplanes for hundreds of $1 million. So those are the kinds of things you need to figure out and experiment with. So don't be afraid of experimentation. Don't be experimenting of failure. So I would just say, go out there and try out new things that might work for you.
I just want to follow up on that. I've seen it being done at, sorry, I went, but I've seen it being done at certain trade shows. I know I'm going to sell something for $200. It's worth $200. Do I park it next to something that's worth $300,000 or $30,000 or $3,000? That to him, it now looks really, is that a psychological piece in the buyer's mind that you're working with?
That's one of them. Yeah, absolutely. I think framing is important. And that's why people, spend so much money on packaging. Sometimes as a consumer, I hate the fact that packaging sometimes takes more space and room than the product itself. I don't love that. But from a marketing perspective, it plays a huge role. So when you're talking about framing and where the product positioning in stores is super relevant and important, that's why, people, when you're selling a product at the eye level, that tends to do better than the product at the bottom shelf. If you put a product that's, $50 right beside one that's a very competitive product beside one that's $5, probably not good for you, right? So that's why, a lot of brands, they'll fight for the best shelving space to be able to figure out where do they want to fit in order to increase their sales. But so that's just one of the tools that you have at your disposal, of course. Now, it depends on what kind of products you sell. A lot of my clients, they don't sell products per se. They sell solutions or implementation of multi-million-dollar technology solutions, right? So you can't just throw that up there. Consumers or customers or clients are become much more sophisticated. So some of these tricks are not going to work on a multi-million-dollar solution. Usually there's buying committees. So you're not selling to one individual, you're selling to multiple individuals in different roles. They care about different things. So it's not about that one thing. It's probably a combination of things. So I always tell customers, think about your ideal client profile or ICP. So that's potentially the decision maker, but also think about the influencers, the people who, the financial people. They might look at that and say, why are we spending this much money? And then you have to talk about procurement people. You have to talk to legal. You have to talk to the potential users of those products and solutions. So it's never as simple as one thing, right? So you have to figure out what is that formula look like for your product or solution, right? So, but it always goes back to this idea of like, think about how your customers think. So put yourself in their shoes. What are they looking for? What are they searching for? How do they find you? What are they saying about your competitors? What are they saying about you? What questions are they asking? That will probably give you a hint of how then you can frame your solution in the context of the perception in the marketplace about yourself and how you can use it to differentiate yourself.
And you had a very personal moment where your beliefs were shaped by trust. And I think that even over features. One thing that I find interesting is sometimes early in the relationship, the worst a person can say is trust me because it makes sure you don't. Help me with that. Explain that to me.
It's a good question. I mean, obviously, there's things that we can think of in our personal life. I think people can relate to, right? When we first get to know someone as another individual, right? That's probably the best analogy I can use here is when you get to know someone, when you first walk into a place and you start talking to them, you almost, and it's not like you ask yourself, why do I like or dislike this person? I think this all becomes somewhat automatic in some regard. And that's probably shaped by backgrounds, how we think about the world, or education, our parents, our friends, and all of that. It's a pretty complex model to look at. So I think for myself, we have to remember that those same things apply in business. People like to buy from people, not brands, right? So they want to deal with people that they like. They want to deal with people that they have similarities with. They want to deal with people that understand them. They're good listeners. They're empathetic. There are problems. So I think that's kind of like, from a personal perspective, I think that's what shapes our beliefs, right? And I think that's the same. If we take that and translate it into the business world, I think we're going to do so much better. So if you're a business owner that doesn't think about those things, you're probably losing out, because at the end of the day, the buyer is going to buy from you not because you have the best X. It's because they want to work with you and what your business is associated with. So it's you become the extension of that perception, right? So the people that work there, that's why it's so important that the people that those buyers are interacting with are so critical. We talked about, I think you called it authenticity, Wayne. It's so important to be authentic, to be trustworthy, that's why, the sleazy sales, car salesman, you know, that philosophy is long gone, because guess what? Like, if you want to buy another car, would you ever go back to that guy? Probably not. Right. So it's all about the long relationships that we built with our prospects and customers that are super critical.
The second time today I've heard this phrase, and the last time I heard it was actually editing another podcast. Someone doing it, talking about valuations, and she was going to her hairdresser out in Alberta, and Buddy moved from one location to another, and she followed him. She didn't keep following him all the way to Lebanon, though. Apparently, that was too far for the transit for a haircut or for getting your hair styled. But in an instance like that, how do you know the product is good? In this case, if you treat the hairdresser as the artisan, but if you're dealing with, let's say, a salesperson, and the product's still good, and there's a change, we retire, we move on to other jobs, we relocate maybe to Lebanon. How do you transfer that connection between the customer to the next person that's handling the sales arrangement, the sales engagement?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that there's a few things I would say. Number one is, don't make sure that the relationship that the customer has with you is not only with one individual. I think there's always this risk that they forge a close relationship and something happens to that individual. They leave the organization, bus hits them, whatever, right? There's things happen. So I think it's always important that there's some transference, like succession plans, or there's that the relationship is shared. So an example could be, if you're dealing with a SaaS organization, well, yes, there's a salesperson that you've dealt with, but then there should be also a relationship with the account manager. There should be a relationship with the customer service person, with the customer success person. Maybe even the CEO of the person might want to say hello to and do the welcome of that customer. So I think that you need to spread that relationship over multiple people, so that it's not just that relationship with one individual, it's now a relationship with the whole company and multiple different individuals, maybe for different functions. I think that's really important. But let's say if you don't have that, and that one individual does own that relationship and that trust with that prospect or customer, I would say it was really important that the transition has to be solid. So let's say the salesperson said, okay, I'm adios, I'm leaving, getting you 2 weeks. Then I would use that 2 weeks to basically go on site with that customer, or get to know the customer as much as possible to essentially try to build that trust in that transition period. I would say that's not ideal. You probably should have done all the steps beforehand. If you're in that space, that's probably what you should do. But never wait for the sales rep to leap and then pick up the phone and start calling the customers. That's probably the worst thing you can do, because chances are that customer's like, oh man, do I have to explain myself one more time? Do I have to tell them everything from the get-go? You don't want that. You want to make sure that your tools and your systems, your CRM platform has as much information and intel about those customers. So you don't put that onus on the customer to retrain you. It has to be done internally.
Martin, one thing that you talk about is helping the client speak with a unique and authentic voice. I'm interested in industries that you think do this very well, maybe clients of yours, maybe not. And also when they spectacularly blew it, when they picked a voice that wasn't authentic and they paid dearly, either or both.
Let me think. I'm trying to think any big brands out there that, really do this well. If you think about the big brands, let me put it this way. I think we talked about this idea that there is this authenticity in my mind, or my book is this idea that the perception of you matches of what you think of yourself. So the external perception matches what you think. So if you nail that and people agree with what your perception is of yourself, then your chances are that you'll probably be fine. So I've seen this happen, like where it falls apart, and I'm not going to name names because I don't want to call the baby ugly, but I want to say that there have been situations where the CEOs and people go into the boardroom and they say, we want to be known for this because we want to be the best in this. And they go and talk about and they come up with the messaging and positioning and they say, this is what I'm going to tell the world. And then they go into with that message and then their customers or prospects go, that doesn't sound like you. That's not what we think about you. I know that's maybe what you think, but that's not, we don't believe that. So if you need to have that mechanism to make sure that you're true to yourself and that your customer agrees with that statement. Now, if you want to improve and you want to tell the customer, hey, you think of us badly and there's there's negative perception, maybe negative reviews about our products, our solutions, then take it in. Take it to the chin and say, okay, what can I learn from this? And go to the world and say, hey, I know that we screwed up here. I know that we could have done that better here. And then taking it and saying, okay, these are the steps that we will need to do and take to improve, and show them every step of the way saying, hey, here, we said we're going to do this. We did it. Did that reach your expectation? Did that land for you? Yes, no. Yes? Excellent. Okay, this is the next step. So you can rebuild and build from maybe the bad place and build up from there. Start again. It always goes back to the customer. If there's something there you could have done better, own it. Own it. Don't shy away from it. And then work backwards and figure out, like, what can I do differently to manage and change that perception in the marketplace about us. That's really, really, really critical. And it's difficult because it's, once people make up their mind, it's challenging. So you have to be really transparent in how you're going to do that and do it. So small little micro steps so they can come back and tell you, okay, all right, I see what they're doing. And it doesn't happen overnight. If you think about, cars, like, I want to say the Japanese brands, back in the 70s, when they entered the North American market, they were seen as the cheap choice, right? That is probably going to fall apart on you. But guess what? Over the years, they've gotten better and better, slowly but surely. And now what? I just bought a Toyota Lexus. And why did I buy it? Because it's probably one of the most reliable cars that's on the market right now. It doesn't break down. The maintenance costs are low, but it didn't happen overnight. Look, it took them 50 years to get there. So fixing the problems is not easy, and fixing the perception is not easy. Like small micro steps over a longer period of time improve. Now, in terms of the brands that did a really good job, I think I'm thinking about, like, I don't know if you guys know Dyson, right? Dyson vacuums. When they first came out of the market, people were like, I don't need another vacuum cleaner. And then you don't tell them about why this particular vacuum is better than others. But what they done is that they pivoted in how they're positioning themselves with thought leadership content, engaging with the audiences. So it wasn't about the suction power or the cyclonic technology. It became more about, hey, there's this cordless freedom that you will have. There's this, it will trap allergens. It's great for families. I think so. They reframed how to look at the value and the problem solving, and that's why people were paying, 5x of what they would normally pay for a vacuum because of those. Because people looked at that and say, "Ah, yeah, it's worth it," because I believe they've done a really good job convincing me that it really is good for my family, and I'm going to invest in. So it feels like I've been a long monologue there, but hopefully that answers your question.
Martin, if you were a startup founder and you've been listening and paying attention, which is good, what's the bold move they can make after this episode? Maybe even right after this episode.
I think that, like I said before, don't try to be everything to everyone. Pick that one area that you can own and be the best at, and make sure you have a good storyline and a lot of social proof out there to tell that story. So it's not a story told by you, the founder. It's the story told by your customers on your behalf, and own that. Maybe it's a killer case study. Maybe it's a really thought-provoking leadership content piece. And remember, you won't win everywhere. Winning in the messy middle is really about allowing the customer to be in the driver's seat. So be everywhere and all the time. Don't just try to go to one kind of campaign and hope for the best, one offer that's going to hopefully sweep them off their feet. No, like be out there with thought leadership, with your own expertise. Make sure your customers are speaking on your behalf. Make sure your employees also tell the story. They're also your ambassadors. So I think that's what I would do. In this messy middle, it's about giving the power back to your customer to be in the driver's seat and owning that one thing that you can build trust around and the conversation around your brand. So I think that's where I would say.
So Martin, if someone's listening to this podcast and go, you know what, I got to reach out to Martin. How do you want them to reach out to you? And where do you want them to reach out to you from? Like Canada, North America?
I'm in Canada. I'm in Toronto, Ontario. But of course, everybody's on LinkedIn. So feel free to look me up on LinkedIn or go to our website. It's probably easiest. My name is not the easiest to remember, but pinch.marketing is. So hopefully check out our website if you have any questions or if you want to, brainstorm some ideas. Happy to help. Happy to have a conversation with you all.
And Martin, do you have any books or podcasts out there right now?
Do I have any podcasts right now
or books? Yeah.
Well, I haven't written a book yet. As much as I like to think I'm a decent writer, it would take me probably 7 years to write something, but we do actually do these short interviews with other marketers where I interview them. It's called the Pitch Of series. It's actually, you can find it on LinkedIn and YouTube. Basically, I interview some folks who are practitioners in the trenches with very practical advice. So if you're a marketer, if you're in partner marketing or channel marketing and tech marketing, I would highly recommend you check it out because I think it's, what better yet? Again, I'm not talking at you. I'm talking with the pros out there who have been and done, and they have some fantastic pieces of advice for everyone. So check it out.
Martin, thank you so much. And I want to say thank you to Martin Pietrzak, my co-host, Wayne Pratt, and you, the Knack for Business listeners, because you know what? Without you being here today and listening, or maybe not today, but, listening to this show wouldn't be possible. All right. And this is really good information to share with you. So Martin helps businesses cut through the sea of sameness. So if you're kind of blending in and, people can't tell where you are, maybe you're too camouflaged. All right. Martin can help you get that kind of popped out of there. Right. And it's all about the buyer journey. And if you're into the SaaS or the tech space, even more of a reason to reach out to Martin.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVISIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter u.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motive8U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.
Working across teams is tough, but Asana helps you handle it. That's because Asana is where humans and AI coordinate work together. AI can spot roadblocks and assign work in a snap, so everything and everyone stays on track. That's how work gets handled. That's Asana. Visit us at asana.com. That's ASANA.com.
Asana.